Hello! So, everyone thinks that vocoders are for doing this, but actually, they're for doing this, and this, and a little bit of this. And yes, this track, you can see, is muted. It's not playing these noises. I'm triggering them with the vocoder. We are going to be diving into my favorite creative use of the Ableton stock vocoder. And I'm actually going to show you these techniques in an applied way, in a way I actually use them on my new track, Man Holding a Box. So go listen to that, obviously. But we're also going to get a little bit into that project file. So I'm going to start by showing you a little bit of this like generative rhythm maker that I created that feeds into the vocoder. And then, yes, we are going to take these crazy sound design files like the one you just heard. And I'm actually going to show you like how I use them and actually created like a full track out of them. Okay, so everything started with these weird kicks. You could use something a little less weird, it doesn't really matter. So I opened up a new MIDI track and I dragged that in there, and then I went to slice mode, right? So that we can trigger each of these kicks individually. Then I added an arpeggiator so I could kind of make this random rhythm generator. I'm also gonna add a random and turn up the chance. And you probably sort of get the idea. If I hold down a note now, okay, now that rhythm was very static because it was just eighth notes. So what I actually did here was I automated two things. First, I just automated the rate of the arpeggiator and I changed it to this millisecond, this free mode. So you can see here, I have all my automation. So when I play the rhythm, right? It's not just eighth notes, it's a much more unconventional pattern. But to keep things a little bit stable, what I also did was automate the chants. So you can see at the beginning of each bar, the chants goes to 0, which means it's always gonna play that first note, right? So this sort of anchors us a little bit. So what I did now was add an amp on heavy on dual, and then most importantly, this vocoder on external mode. And then you can see I have this track called external here, right? And I'm getting the audio from external, from this track, right? So if I play this right now, you won't hear anything. And that's because there's nothing on this track, right? We need some sort of source material that's on this track. Okay, so for example, I have this atmospheric loop here, and I'm just gonna solo this so you can hear it. Now, what's important to notice here is that this external track is turned off, right? Because we don't want to hear it as well. We just want to use it as a source. So now over here, if I play this, you will now be able to hear something. Okay, so sounds a little crazy, but let's begin to shape it. So on the vocoder, I have enhance on, and then the main things I'm gonna wanna mess with are the depth, the formant, and the release. And then you can also see that I've added this grain delay where I have the time all the way down, feedback all the way up, and I'm gonna mostly mess with the spray and the frequency. And I'm just gonna take a sec to like dial in this sound so you can get a little bit of a sense of what the possibilities are. So you can really see like how many different sonic possibilities there are. And this gets even crazier when we start to add different types of material. So I can literally put in like a break here. So again, I'll solo this so you can hear it. Okay. And again, I'm just gonna play with these settings. So that's awesome. And then I love putting in other really aggressive stuff like this loop from the Kavari sample pack. And then you can see that down here, I have this resampling track, right? Which is on resampling over here. And I can just arm this and then hit record. And then I can go back here and just start moving these things around. Now, I know I always show you guys that, but the reason I wanted to talk about it today is because look at how this file is named, right? It's called 3-audio. This one's called 4-audio, right? There is a predictable system by which these files are named, which means that if we Command F and then type in, say, 4-audio, we can find literally everything we've ever resampled before, right? And I can start to take some of these other things I've resampled and put them in here as well. Okay, so I'll take this. Here's something I found that sounds like a sample of a record. Right? It's kind of a record rewinding. So with that, and the point with all of this is not to find something that's perfect, but just to mess around and resample lots. And you can see I have all of this stuff down here. This is the material that I ended up using to make the track. And I didn't use all of it, but I found particular parts that I really liked. For example, this piece. Okay, now, as you guys always say, hey, that's cool, but how do I actually use it? So let's talk about some of my strategies for actually using these big, long sound design files. So now that we've heard that piece, I'm going to play you a part of the song, and I think you'll recognize it. So you can see this sort of like repeating sound really forms the backbone of like what's going on here. So this is one of my favorite strategies for using these sound design things. Just create a new MIDI track, right? Then I'm going to drag our sound design file into here and just add an arpeggiator and throw this onto slice mode. And then you can basically just play around on your keyboard and find different slices that you like. That always sounds so good to me. And just some little tips to make it a little bit more dynamic. If you want, you can add some random velocity preset. Right, so you get some volume variation. And if you go to controls, you can also turn up this random pan, which will randomly pan each one of those notes. Right, so that's a way to kind of spice it up. But honestly, I don't even do that much. I think it sounds really good on its own sometimes. It can almost be nice to have that slightly more monotonous sound. So another part I like is with these vocal chops. So we'll listen really quickly. Right? And again, this vocal chop is just an acapella I dragged in with an arpeggiator, a random, and then we are on slice mode. And so again, if you arm this track and play around with your keyboard, it sounds so good. And again, I did even the same thing with this bass sound. This is just an Ableton preset, Azimuth bass. And again, just added an arpeggiator on 16th, right? And so these really complement each other because they're playing with the same rhythm. And then again, I know I've had some people ask about the piano in the song. It's one of my absolute favorite parts. I'll play a quick piece. And this is just the Ableton stock grand piano, which is actually quite nice. It is like a whole multi-sampled piano. And again, I have it sounding the way it does because I've turned up the glue and the soft hard, which makes it much more kind of aggressive. Also have some Ableton amp on it. But yeah, that's it. Just played in off the Ableton grand piano. And again, the final thing I want to show you is another variation on this arpeggiator technique, but this time used to create like an ambient soundscape. And again, I'll just recreate this so you can see how it's done. I have an empty MIDI track. I'm adding this sound design file, and then I'm going to right click in the waveform and hit reverse sample to reverse it. Go to slice mode. And then again, we will add an arpeggiator. Right? But this time, again, we want it to be a little bit more of this ambient wash. We might want to play something like a chord. So what we can do in the arpeggiator style is go to chord trigger. So normally when you hold down a chord in an arpeggiator, it will play each note individually, but now it's going to play all 3 or 4 or 5 notes for us. Of course, when you play it, you'll realize that doesn't happen. Why is that? It's because you need to go to playback and change it to poly, so it will play multiple samples for you. So now I'm going to turn the rate up to 16ths and the gate up to 100, so it's playing the full thing. And then all we need to do is add some reverb and some delay. And again, you can always create variations and layers on this by, say, changing the rate and then maybe changing the transposition. And again, I always loved. Yeah, I just think this sounds so good. So again, just a little bit of a shorter one here today, but if there's anything you saw in this project file as I was just scrolling around that you're curious about, or any questions you have about the song, just drop them in the comments and I will literally tell you everything. I have nothing to gatekeep. And again, thanks to all the people who have been listening and sending me messages. It has really meant a lot.